Hello, this is Harrison Barton, and I'm going to be doing a short, relatively short video series where I play through some of the games that I've been the lead creative director and lead designer on, and sort of talk about some of my decisions and things like that. We're going to start with Girl I See Right Through You, which I have done a Post Mortem on before, but it was more casual, so I'd like to do a series of videos that go into more depth and also talk about other games as well that I've done. So yeah, let's get started. This game, for those who don't know, a little background, is like heavily story based. I'm not really going to be reading the text, but I'll kind of like scroll through the text so that you can follow along. But I am going to be talking about narrative decisions and things like that. So if you want to, you can pause the video, I guess, and read the text for yourself, or you can just play the game. But yeah, for the purpose of this, I'm not going to be reading the text. So, the development of these cutscenes was very strange because I didn't really know what I was doing. This was my first Unity project, so a lot of it was me teaching myself how, like, the scripting and all of that worked with Unity. So, like, you'll notice that the cutscenes in the first few levels actually kind of change. So, like, what you're seeing right now is kind of the text box on the bottom is really big, and there's the B button to continue, and I'm playing with the controller. But the next one is going to look considerably different because I found a better way to do it. So this is actually like the most involved cutscene in like the entire game, actually. Now the interesting thing, I guess, about that is I decided not to do that because this one took so much time. I think this cutscene itself took a better part of like 2 weeks to do. There's just a lot going on with like all these different objects animating at once. But yeah, like as you're noticing, the cutscene looks different. The text box on the bottom is smaller, and kind of the reason I decided to change it was because the other one, like, I mean, the first cutscene was designed intentionally like that because the focus was on the character, but for like the future cutscenes I decided to have a more zoomed out camera. So for those who don't know, the story of the game revolves around Bethany, who's this ghost of this girl who's dead, and she's going back into this town where the people she used to know are coming to terms with her death, so you have to help them by like visiting their subconscious and essentially guiding them through the 5 stages of grief. So this is so the 2 main characters, or I guess the 3 main characters in the game, are who you're seeing in this room right now. So the player character is Bethany, who is the girl who's actually died. The girl with the red hair is named Effie, and she is this medium who kind of summons you back somehow. And she doesn't have like a direct connection to the player, so she's kind of experiencing everything with new fresh eyes as the player is as well. And the character of Bethany is rediscovering these things because things have changed. And you're kind of Navi, like tutorial speech bubble kind of guy character over here, Poltergeist. He kind of directs you when you don't know what to do, and it's not like explicitly mentioned in the game, but he's supposed to be like a distant relative to you. And I'll talk a little bit about color language as well, maybe in this video, but it is something that I consciously thought about in the game's development, as pink is kind of used to symbolize the main character and her anxieties and fears, kind of. So Poltergeist is also pink. Bethany has pink hair, which she doesn't have normally, but her ghost self does, because it kind of is representative of that fear, I guess. Something that doesn't really have much depth to it, but I decided to include anyway because it was kind of funny, was in any bed you can kind of jump, and it kind of bounces you around. And that's something that players, I noticed, really liked, even if it doesn't have like any real meaning to it. I like to include those kinds of small details because when the player like discovers something like that, it kind of feels like this sense of self-discovery, even though it was kind of by design put there. And generally, like, small things like that are really cool. So this is like our first real view of the town of Seaside, which I don't think is actually ever referenced by name. But what you have here is like the very traditional like adventure game overworld where you can kind of go around and talk to people. And so like Poltergeist tells you kind of where the game path is supposed to go, so he kind of tells you to check out the graveyard, which you just came from, which is to the left. And that is counterintuitive because like players are going to want to go right because that's just how most games are. So that's going to lead the player to end up talking to all these NPCs, and they'll kind of get to the end of this area here and get to this invisible wall with like an observe. So like you get like a Pokemon reference saying that you're not supposed to go over there yet, there's still stuff to check out. So yep, you just kind of go back to the left, and you can even go and revisit rooms you've already been in as well. And you can kind of get like hidden pieces of text for doing that. But yeah, essentially having visited to the right and realizing you can't go that way yet, you go back to the left and you can talk to Poltergeist, who will lead you this way. And this is kind of another one of the Easter eggs where it's like we put the names of the staff on the tombstones just kind of as a joke. And then the one in the center, of course, is Bethany's, kind of giving the player the sense of the weight of what's happened by telling you that she was only 10 when she died, saying that maybe there was a complication, like it wasn't of natural causes necessarily. So the purpose of this next bit actually is to show the player how to actually use the main mechanic. So you kind of come across Poltergeist here, and he tells you that the door is locked. And then you get this help text which tells you AX to ghost, which kind of is supposed to be the introduction to what the main mechanic of the game is, which is like ghosting through objects, which you haven't used until now. So doing that kind of lets you go into this next cutscene. And now for the rest of the game, the cutscenes end up looking like this, because we started developing the sprites for the character avatars, and we decided to kind of use this format for the rest of the cutscenes. Again, in the background, there's a lot of like small details that like I guess first-time players may not pick up on, but anyone who's kind of paying close attention might. there is a picture of someone who looks like Bethany in the background, but she doesn't have pink hair. Now I was talking about that earlier. And there's also flowers. There's a flower on the table, and then there's a flower in the background that looks kind of like a drawing of a flower. Again, the pink kind of representing Bethany. And then just so the player further gets the mechanic of ghosting, you're given the chance to ghost again. And this time you realize that ghosting is like going into the subconscious of the character when you're given this text. It's literally. So this next bit is kind of the first example of one of the gameplay levels, so that there's a combination of adventure levels and platforming levels. So this is like the first platforming level in which you're supposed to perform this mechanic in order to get through this column. And it's pretty understandable that players might get a little bit lost here because they've never done this before. So like after you like wait long enough or just don't get what to do, there will be help text that kind of pops up that again reminds you, AX to ghost, dude, in case you didn't get it the first few times. I'm looking back on it, I think this level, which is level 2, is the most unsuccessful level of the game because we were again still trying to figure out what the levels were like. And I kind of wanted to provide like different ways to solve the level essentially. Like for example, you could go to that bottom path to get up there, or you could go up here. And I think the reason why this kind of doesn't necessarily work as a first level is that it's a little too confusing. So in my opinion, the next level, level 3, is kind of what I'd consider to be the first successful level, because while you do kind of like understand the mechanic from the first section, it might not have been executed as well as I would have liked. So, okay, here you're introduced to these moving platforms again. Now you can see that they move horizontal as well as vertical. You're also introduced to these like black spinny things, and they kill you. I mean, it's not necessarily explicitly told to you, but I feel like if like you approached, like I don't really like having help text used a lot. I feel like it kind of insults the player's intelligence. So like I feel like if you got to like right before this black splotch and like the game paused and like a help text window came up and said like, oh, by the way, these black things kill you, I feel like that would sort of be insulting the intelligence of the player. I'd rather have it somewhat through trial and error so they feel like it's at least somewhat self-discovered. Now this is, I think, also the first instance of the ghost coin, which naturally you'll pick up because it's shiny. And it actually refills your energy gauge. And if the player dies, they'll notice that it also acts as a checkpoint. And those are used throughout the rest of the game to checkpoint and like serve as recharging energy items. So I'm still like pretty happy with how that level turned out. I think that it kind of accomplished the goal that it was meant to. This is another one that's kind of weird. I wanted to have an example of a level that purely was focused on just training the player's dexterity and like comfortableness with just moving around obstacles. So in this level, you really barely use the ghost at all. It's just kind of like an elevator that goes up and you have to dodge the blocks. And there's a part in the center where you get off and get on another elevator. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that players would feel comfortable dodging obstacles and getting a sense of how large the hitbox was for the player. Oh shit. But yeah, this one's still of the 13 or so levels. I want to say this one and there's another one that comes up later give people probably the most trouble. Oh, I forgot to mention the objects that you pick up that kind of trigger the end of the level are also what we call mementos, which have some like relevance to like the character, and so do the names of the levels as well. Often they're kind of telling a story that's like a little looser than the main story, often relating to the character whose subconscious you're in. Currently we're in the grandma's subconscious. Originally there was a very strange level that went in the place of this one. It was kind of like solving a puzzle by building the staircase. And I really liked the concept of that, but it wasn't really executed very well because it was so different from the rest of the game. So it ended up being cut and replaced with this one, which is more traditional. And actually, so this level was made pretty late in the production, so probably after the whole of World 2 when it was developed, which is why it kind of feels cohesive with the rest of the game. So now you are essentially revisiting the town. At this point, you've gone all the way to the left, like there's nowhere to go else to the left, I guess. So you have to essentially just go all the way to the right. And one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to give hints to like end game content earlier in the game, so like you'll see people who you're gonna see later who you might remember as you're walking through here, and kind of the music cuts out as you see somebody who might be your mom, and you learn later that she is, which is kind of supposed to give some emotional resonance, I guess. So like he sees a burger place in the distance, which kind of leads the player to believe that now they can actually keep going to the right and experience more of the town. So originally there were going to be 5 different worlds, each one for one of the stages of grief. So the grandma was supposed to be denial, and this character August was supposed to be anger. But due to cuts, we ended up only doing 3 of them and kind of like mixing the themes inside the worlds themselves. But the characters still remained, even though we didn't end up having worlds for all of them. So the next world essentially is the sisters. I like this, so I guess talking more about the small detail stuff that I mentioned earlier with the bed. I like this room. I mean, you only really come in here the one time unless you come back in later. There was a lot of attention to detail given to this room for like no particular reason other than the fact that I thought it would be kind of cool. Like for example, when you're walking in, you kind of go behind the counter and like there's like ketchup and like mustard bottles and like little napkin holders and like a menu in the background. And actually the music was made specifically for this level and put through like an audio program to make it sound like it was like coming over a radio speaker. Just because I don't know, I really like small details like that. I really feel like they give a lot of life to a game. So this is kind of when I'm thinking about serious games or like games for good, games that have like emotional resonance, I like to think about story beats, and like I've called them like defining moments of darkness in the past, but really they can be like any kind of emotionally resonant moment. But I kind of considered, even though the grandma scene was like quote unquote sad, I really considered this scene to be like the first kick in the stomach, I guess, to just kind of be like, oh, okay, this game has, you know, is kind of discussing some serious issues. Like you see the sister kind of lying on the floor of her room with a bunch of Lego blocks around, just kind of like lying there. And originally I was gonna have Poltergeist say something at this scene, but I felt like the silence was kind of more effective. And then you have like this huge contrast between like the really dark area you were in previously and this more bright inside her mind area. And so this is the introduction of a new mechanic, which are these switches that allow you to ghost through certain colors of blocks. Like, if you don't activate the switch that corresponds to the color of the block, you can't ghost through it, and only until you activate it can you ghost through it. So, the idea for this level is kind of to introduce that mechanic. So, you see the end goal right away, but you can't get to it because you've just activated the switch that made it so you can't ghost through the red blocks anymore. So you kind of have to go down and discover that that's kind of how the mechanic works. And again, just kind of further cementing the fact that this is how the mechanic works. You kind of do this several times, and then the hope is that, like, you know, at that point the player kind of gets, okay, you know, when you press the color of the switch, it activates the ghosting mechanic through the certain walls. Now we're introducing a new mechanic as well in this level of these platforms that can kind of break underneath you. So essentially you have to just jump off them pretty fast after you jump on them. And you're layering these mechanics. Like, so you're introducing the blocks in combination with the switches, so you have to press them, get off the block, press them, get off the block, to remind the player of the mechanic they just learned while still introducing the new one. And now you want to also kind of present the existing mechanics in new ways. So for this segment, you're getting the moving platforms from before, but now you have to also press these switches to let you go through the walls by jumping up into them. Now, I've gotten a lot of grief for this switch, which when you press it, it's revealed that it's a trap, and that's actually used several times. I kind of like it, but I can understand the criticism of it being kind of unfair. I guess the intent behind it was to keep players on their toes and like paying attention. So again, there's another trap over there. This level was kind of a weird one. I wanted to kind of have a level that was like a horseshoe shape, where the goal was at the bottom in the middle, so you kind of go either right or left. It ended up being that most players went right because I think just like right-handed people will usually choose the right path for some reason. But like both paths end up leading to this end part, so I'll show you the other one as well. Oh, and also these thwomps, these thwomp-like mechanics are introduced, which essentially they have this, like, they move up and then they move down, and they can crush you. So a lot of World 2 is just kind of introducing interesting new mechanics that can be used for movement puzzles. This level is also supposed to be a little bit of a breather level after the last one, which is a little more intense. And then you get this one, which is a little more intense, where you have this time pressure of this lava essentially rising as you're trying to get through these platforming segments. This one's probably the hardest level aside from the last one, just because I think of the time pressure. You get a checkpoint in the middle of the level, which when you die will reset the lava to a certain point, so you're not like completely at a loss. But yeah, for first-time players especially, this one is pretty difficult. I remember when we went to PAX, there were some players who were actually kind of angry with me because of this one, but most of them ended up solving it. So again, for the last level, you have like the dark aesthetic with the yellow text, the last level of the world. This one is slower paced and a little bit more methodical. You have to kind of think a little bit about where you go. There's kind of a lot of timing involved in this one, which comes up a lot in the final world as well. So it's kind of prepping you for that. But yeah, the basic idea behind the mechanics is they're sort of supposed to reflect different elements of the stages of grief. So like the shaking platforms and like obstacles are supposed to be anger and so on and so forth. I didn't want to hit people over the head with the themes because I feel like, again, like I previously was talking about, that kind of insults people's intelligence. Like there have been some other games that I've seen that tackle grief acceptance, where they have like the levels are literally called like level 1 denial, level 2 anger, level 3, you know. To me, that just kind of seems a little ham-fisted, and again, it just kind of insults their intelligence. Like, I feel like smart players or like people who care about the story will figure out that stuff on their own. And when they do figure it out, they feel rewarded for doing so. So yeah, we're approaching endgame here, and so you're kind of have to go back through the town again. I've gotten some questions of wondering and being concerned if players would get lost, and usually how I've responded to them is just kind of by saying, well, the town is essentially a line. You can only go two ways. I mean, sure, you can go inside the houses, but there's really only like 2 or 3 houses in the entire map that you can go inside. So I guess technically you could get lost, but I mean, you go all the way to one end of the map, hit a wall, and go all the way to the other, and eventually you're gonna find out where you're supposed to go. One of the things that I didn't mention is that these lampposts are kind of like mark the edge of different segments of the town. Originally they weren't there, and players were kind of confused what denoted each overworld level, I guess. So like they were added later to kind of help with guidance. So we have the next character, Howard, who is depression. Essentially, you're kind of literally going through the stages of grief. You have Granny, who is the denial. August is anger. Celeste is bargaining. And Howard is depression, until you get to your parents, who are acceptance. And so after you go through that segment, the music kind of cuts out again. Usually when you have like an absence of sound, it's kind of supposed to be some kind of emotional beat. So you kind of talk with Poltergeist, and he says that like you're beginning to fade from the world because you're essentially mending the problems of your absence. And then you have this segment, which is I wanted to have some kind of internal dialogue with Bethany where she's beginning to like fade from the real world, I guess, but she wants to stay because she's having like a good time hanging out with her old friends. So you're kind of like going through the levels in a mismatched order. Like visiting places you've already been, so on and so forth. Again, it's supposed to kind of set a certain tone, I guess. And this is where Poltergeist kind of leaves you. He says, "Hey kid, I don't think you'll be needing me anymore. If you've got to go, I've got to stay. It's been fun." So this is like kind of where the mentor leaves you to complete the game. So at this point, you are talking with your parents, or I guess Effie is talking for you. And they're kind of attempting, because I guess the story is Effie thinks that she can bring Bethany back to life by doing these things. So she's guiding you through the stages of grief to do that, and the parents kind of who are aware of the situation, how it really is, know that that isn't going to happen. So these segments are pretty dark, both thematically and actually. But yeah, it's essentially using all the mechanics you've learned so far, with the addition of these like spiky grounds, which use the same spikes as the thwomp platform things, so you kind of know that they'll kill you. And for the blocks that you can go through, they're kind of these like dilapidated buildings, and when you get to the colored ones, the frames inside the buildings have the specific colors that correspond to the buttons. Again, for this level, it's get good at timing and know when to cancel your ghosts and your jumps. That's kind of the purpose of this one. And again, revisiting some of the elevator mechanics from earlier in the game. Revisiting the falling and ghosting from level 3. And this is kind of a puzzle. A little like something different to think about, where you have the end goal over there, and this platform that brings you up is a blue button, so it makes so you can't go through there, so you have to fall back down, press the next one over. Like a little bit of a puzzle to add some variation, I guess. Then you have this level, which is mostly a story-based level where you're jumping across these platforms while there's a heart monitor going on in the background, and as you jump across the platforms and hear the heart monitor go, it begins to speed up and the platform distance gets closer. It's also, I talked about this before in the more casual Post Mortem that I did of the game, where I think that the purpose of the heart monitor is to show that the ghost meter that you have is a similar type thing. So essentially the ghost meter represents holding on to something, and the point of the game, I guess thematically, is learning to let go. Again, you have the flower from earlier in the jar that was in Granny's house, now on the table in what is assumed to be a hospital where you have just died. And you have the final level. This one is just kind of, as the final level should be, the final test of the player's skill. A lot of very precise timing, very precise jumps, and very precise ghosts. This is reminiscent of the segment from earlier where you had to jump and press the buttons. And level 7. Now with the addition of the spike box thwomp type things. Especially in this level, you have to be careful about conserving your ghost meter as well, which is something that's used to a certain extent in some levels, but not as much as I would have liked looking back on it. For context, it's essentially been a year since I made this game, so it's interesting to look back on it and think about things that I liked, that I thought I did well, and things that could have been fixed. Then you kind of have this brief monologue sort of things, the thoughts about the main, or being had by the main character. And the idea behind this ending bit is it's supposed to be reminiscent of the previous level, and by the end you have run out of ghost meter, so you're essentially ready to let go at this point. So for the first time, the main character actually has a line of dialogue. And I didn't want to just end the game here. I wanted to end the game on gameplay. So the last bit of gameplay is you have control over the player, there's no HUD, and you can kind of walk around in this empty white void of space as you slowly kind of fade away. It's a little tongue-in-cheek, I guess, but I think it is effective. And you get this poem that kind of ends the narrative. Over the misty sea in suburban wood, our little treasure did lie. Only when it disappeared did I begin to see clearly. No longer did I try to wander and hide, but it always did see right through me. Now, girl, I see right through you. And that's the explanation for the name of the game. So, yep, that's the game, and hopefully you enjoyed this more in-depth look into my design philosophy behind it. If you have questions or comments, you can reach me at Twitter at SpyroSmithy, or so that's at SPYROSMITHY, and my website is harrisonbarton.com. And thank you for watching and or listening. Thank you.